Have you ever wondered what happens when the security of family starts to fade as we grow older? What if the very people who once cared for you begin to feel distant, and the future becomes filled with uncertainty? For many elderly individuals, this is a reality they face every day. In today's video, we're going to explore the deeply personal journey of Grandpa Juan, a man who, at 70, discovered the harsh truths about aging, the limitations of family support, and the importance of maintaining independence. But this isn't just another story about aging. It's a story about resilience, unexpected solutions, and the power of human connection in our later years. Grandpa Juan found a way to navigate his golden years with dignity, despite the challenges that often leave older adults feeling abandoned and overlooked. In this video, you'll not only hear his heart-wrenching experiences, but also discover how he created a new sense of community and stability for himself in a way that might just inspire you to rethink how we approach aging. Stick with us until the end, because we'll also share some practical lessons on how older adults can adapt to changing circumstances, the importance of having a care plan, and how small, everyday connections can make a world of difference. Whether you're in your later years, caring for someone you love, or simply curious about how society is navigating the challenges of aging, this video is packed with insights that you won't want to miss. So, if you're ready to dive into a powerful story of survival and self-sufficiency, grab a seat and keep watching. You may just find the inspiration or solution you've been searching for. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me, and if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. Part 1. The story of Grandpa Juan. At the age of 70, Grandpa Juan found himself sitting quietly, deeply reflecting on the intricate mosaic of his life. He had lived through so many different chapters, each one bringing its own set of challenges, disappointments, and, in some cases, moments of unexpected joy. There had been the time he lived with his children, hoping that their home would offer him the warmth and support he so desperately needed. Then, there was the time he tried hiring a caregiver, hoping that the professional help would bring him the care and comfort he deserved. And in the final chapter of his journey, there was the time he spent in a nursing home, a place where the world seemed to fade into the background, leaving him feeling isolated and disconnected. Each of these experiences, while filled with well-meaning gestures and care, left him with a sense of dissatisfaction, as if something essential was missing. Something deeper, something more meaningful, that would allow him to embrace the fullness of his golden years with dignity and peace. After months of introspection and quiet contemplation, Grandpa Juan stumbled upon a living arrangement that finally spoke to his heart. It wasn't just about having a roof over his head or someone to check in on him. No, it was about finding a space where he could truly be. A space that allowed him to breathe, to feel seen, to maintain his autonomy, and to still feel a sense of belonging. This newfound arrangement gave him not only the comfort he had been craving, but also the independence he so deeply valued. He embraced this new chapter with open arms, knowing that it wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary for his soul, a way for him to honor his own needs and desires in this final stretch of his journey. To this day, he continues to live in that space, cherishing the peace it brings him and knowing that, in this late season of his life, he has found something truly special. Looking back, Grandpa Juan often reflects on the years leading up to his 75th birthday, a time when his health began to decline in ways he couldn't have imagined. He recalls the years when his beloved wife was still by his side, her presence a constant source of comfort and security. The two of them had made a pact, a promise to always care for each other, especially in times of illness. He remembers the countless trips to the hospital together, where their laughter and companionship made the sterile, clinical environment feel more like a place of connection than one of suffering. Those moments, despite their discomforts, were filled with shared memories, an unspoken understanding, and love so deep that it turned even the darkest days into something bearable. But then, when his wife passed away, everything changed. The world seemed to shift under his feet, leaving him feeling vulnerable and alone. The simple act of going to the hospital became a terrifying ordeal, a looming cloud that filled him with dread and anxiety. Without her there, the hospital visits lost their sense of camaraderie, and the long, lonely wait in cold, sterile rooms felt even longer and colder. He began to feel like a stranger in his own body, weakened by age and illness, his spirit drained after every appointment. And yet, through it all, he never once wanted to burden his children. He had always been fiercely independent, wanting to protect them from the weight of his suffering. He loved them too much to ask them for help. Despite this, he found himself in an ironic situation. His son and daughter, both with their own families and responsibilities, had their lives upended by his illness. They stepped in to care for him, but the guilt and unease he felt every time they rearranged their schedules to look after him weighed heavily on his heart. He had always tried to be the strong one, the one who gave, not the one who took. But now, as he needed them more than ever, he found himself on the receiving end of their love and care, and it hurt him deeply to realize how much he had unknowingly become a burden to them. It was during a routine trip to the market that fate intervened in a way he never expected. A fall, a stumble, and suddenly he was facing another hospitalization, this time with a doctor telling him that he would need at least 6 months to recover. His children, ever loving and concerned, came up with a plan to have him alternate between their 2 homes, spending 3 months with each of them. It was a thoughtful gesture, but it left Grandpa Juan feeling more like a visitor than a father. There's an old saying that has always resonated with him. A father's house will always be the house of the children, but a child's house will never be the father's house. As much as his children tried to make him feel at home, he couldn't escape the truth of those words. No matter how much they tried to make him feel welcome, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was living in someone else's life, not his own. It was in this quiet ache of longing for a place that truly felt like his own that Grandpa Juan found the key to his peace. He realized that, to live fully in his later years, he needed more than just love from his children. He needed a space where he could feel at home with himself. And that's when he found it. A living arrangement that allowed him to maintain his dignity, his sense of self, and his autonomy. It wasn't a place of mere survival. It was a place of living. This sanctuary gave him the freedom to be himself, to make choices, and to live with the peace of mind that he had been searching for all along. It reminded him that, no matter the stage of life, it's never too late to create a life that is meaningful, fulfilling, and full of joy. Grandpa Juan finally found a space where his spirit could flourish once again, a place where he could experience the deep satisfaction of knowing he was truly home. Living in my children's homes over the past few months has been a profound and, at times, painful experience that has left an aching emptiness in my heart, a sense of isolation that has become almost unbearable. While I am truly grateful for their kindness and the shelter they've provided, there's an undeniable sense that no matter how well maintained their homes are, they can never truly be mine. I find myself constantly telling myself that I should be content, that having a place to sleep and food to eat is enough, but it never feels like it is. Deep down, I yearn for something more than just physical comfort. There is an emotional distance that hangs between me and my children, an invisible wall I can't seem to break through, no matter how hard I try. Every day feels like I'm living in someone else's world, one where I am just an outsider, a guest at best. The house is theirs, and I am simply passing through. At mealtimes, I feel the weight of that distance more than ever. While my children sit together, laughing and talking with such ease, I find myself retreating to a room alone, quietly eating my meal in solitude. The absence of their warmth, their presence, in those moments is like a constant reminder that I am no longer part of the life they're living. It's as if they are part of some vibrant, evolving world that I no longer fit into, and I am just a shadow on the periphery. Even the casual suggestion that I prepare my meals, something I know they say out of convenience, hits me like a sharp slap. It feels less like a practical suggestion and more like an unspoken message that I'm a burden, something to be dealt with from a distance, rather than someone they want to care for. The words may not be cruel, but the undertone of them is. I can't help but feel as if they see me as a relic, a fading figure whose place in their lives is becoming less and less certain. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. As these feelings stir inside me, I try to suppress them, swallow the hurt, and pretend it doesn't matter. But the reality is that these emotions cut deeper than anything physical. The silence at the dinner table, the awkwardness in our conversations, it all weighs on me more than I'd like to admit. I can sense the growing impatience when I speak, the subtle way they brush aside my thoughts as if they are outdated or irrelevant. I can feel myself becoming more and more invisible, not just in the world outside, but even in my own family. My words are misunderstood, tangled in the complexities of aging, and I find myself longing for the simplicity of the past when things seemed easier, when our laughter filled the house and our conversations flowed without the strain of generational gaps. Those were the moments I cherished, and now they feel like a distant dream. After what felt like an eternity, I began to feel the pull of my own home again, the familiar space that still holds the echoes of the life I once knew, of who I once was. It was then that I truly understood the meaning behind the saying, "Not everything that glitters is gold." My house, though small and modest, holds my memories, my identity, and the autonomy I so desperately crave. It is the one place where I feel I am still in control of my life, where I don't feel like an outsider in my opinion. But even that small sense of control is slipping through my fingers. My recent leg injury, a cruel reminder of my aging body, has left me struggling with constant pain and limited mobility. It's as though the very essence of who I was, strong, independent, capable, is slowly being stripped away. And yet, the hardest part is realizing how much I now depend on others. Living alone is no longer a choice, but a challenge that feels insurmountable at times. The simplest tasks, grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, have become monumental feats that drain me physically and emotionally. Each trip to the market feels like a battle against my own body. I return home, legs aching, sweat on my brow, feeling defeated by something as basic as buying food. This is not the life I imagined for myself in my later years, and it's painful to accept. Reluctantly, I had to make the difficult decision to hire a caregiver. The weight of this choice sits heavily on me, both financially and emotionally. The monthly salary of €800 is a bitter burden, especially given the limited nature of my pension. I feel the strain in every payment, and yet I have no other choice. To make matters worse, I rely on my children's modest monthly contribution of €110 to help cover the cost of this necessary assistance. The guilt of imposing on them in this way haunts me. I never wanted to be a burden, but I fear that is exactly what I've become. The hardest part is knowing that I may have been able to handle things on my own in a different life, a life where I wasn't constrained by the realities of aging. As I watch the caregivers come and go, the stark contrast between my situation and that of families who can afford to provide for their caregivers properly is all too clear. The ones who can offer warm meals, a comfortable environment, and the care that nurtures both body and soul seem to live in an entirely different world. For me, the caregivers who have come to my door often leave, disheartened by the minimal rations they are expected to work with. They describe the meals as rabbit food, too sparse and too plain to fuel the kind of energy needed for the hard work they do. It's heartbreaking to think that the very thing that keeps me going, my limited but cherished independence, also serves as the reason for their departure. The ripple effect of my frugality, my inability to provide what others might consider basic sustenance, leaves me feeling more alone than ever. It's as if I'm not only losing my physical strength but also my dignity, the one thing that I've always tried to hold on to, even as everything else slips away. In the end, I'm left with the painful realization that aging is not just about the physical decline, but about the emotional toll it takes. The loneliness, the guilt, the sense of invisibility, it all becomes a part of you in ways you never expected. As I try to navigate this new chapter of my life, I can't help but wonder, is there a place for me in the world anymore? Or have I become something to be dealt with, like an inconvenience to be managed rather than someone to be cherished? The answers remain elusive, but the questions linger, like shadows in the corners of my heart. It's hard to even begin to express just how heavy my heart feels right now, with so many overwhelming thoughts weighing me down. As if it weren't discouraging enough to realize how difficult it has become to secure the kind of help I need, even the caregiving agencies that should be there to support me are reluctant to send anyone. They say the conditions here are simply too difficult to offer any hope for long-term satisfaction, as if I'm just another burden to them. I can't help but feel defeated, as though the very world around me is closing in. The realization settles deep within me. This is the stark truth I've been trying to avoid, that I might have no choice but to consider alternatives I had always hoped to escape. The prospect of moving into a nursing home, something I've dreaded for so long, now looms in front of me like an unwelcome shadow. It feels like another loss in a series of heartbreaking ones, a painful reminder that with each passing day, we lose a little bit more of ourselves. I crave a sense of warmth, of belonging, things that once seemed so simple. But now, with the thought of asking my son for help to navigate this transition, my heart aches. The thought of leaning on him like this stirs something deeper within me, a bitter acknowledgement of how much distance has crept between us over the years. It's a cruel twist, aging, that is, pulling us into places we never imagined, places we thought we could avoid if only we tried harder, hand ELD on tighter. The nursing home I ended up in, to be completely honest, felt like the antithesis of everything I had hoped for. It was far from a comfortable haven for someone in their later years. It was cheap, yes, that much was true, but it also felt cold, sterile, and lacking any semblance of the warmth or care that should define such a place. The facilities were basic at best, the amenities few and far between, and each day there was a heavy, palpable sense of longing for something more, something better. But despite its many flaws, it was affordable on my pension, and that small relief in the end was what I clung to. It meant that my children would no longer have to carry the financial weight of a caregiver. That thought brought me some measure of peace. I didn't want to add to their burdens, knowing they had their struggles to face. In that sense, my decision to stay there was born from love for them, a desire to do what I could to ease their lives, even if it meant enduring the discomforts of a place I never imagined I would end up. And so, I made peace with my new reality, telling myself that this would be where I would spend the rest of my days, a decision made with the hope that it might somehow make things easier for my family. Yet, as someone who has always prided herself on a certain freedom of spirit, I found myself suffocating under the rigid, impersonal structure of life in that nursing home. The rules were unyielding, the atmosphere stifling, and every day felt like a battle against something I couldn't quite explain. I struggled to adapt to the constant surveillance, the lack of privacy, and the loss of autonomy that I had cherished all my life. The days bled into each other in a monotonous blur, and after only a month, I found myself feeling like a stranger in my skin, unable to settle into a life that was never meant for me. With a heavy heart, I decided to leave, feeling like I was reclaiming a piece of myself I feared I might lose forever. Returning home, to the familiar solitude of my apartment, was like taking a deep, refreshing breath after being underwater for too long. It was an act of independence, a reaffirmation that I was still me, still capable of making choices for myself, however small they may seem. Just as I was beginning to find my footing again, life offered me a small, unexpected blessing. An online grocery shopping service became available in my area, and I could barely contain my relief. With the simple act of asking my daughter to place an order for me, a world of possibilities opened up. The groceries could be picked up at a small convenience store just steps from my apartment, and I no longer had to struggle with painful walks to the store. It was a quiet but profound joy, the kind of relief that comes with the smallest victories. I could feel the tension in my legs ease, the pain becoming a little less sharp, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. The young couple who ran the store were more than just helpful. They were kind and attentive, noticing my struggles and offering assistance without hesitation. Over time, what began as a simple exchange of favors grew into something deeper, a genuine friendship that warmed my heart. Their compassion was a balm to my weary soul, and every interaction, however brief, brought a little light into my days. It wasn't just about the groceries. It was about the connection, the shared moments of kindness that made the world feel a little less cold. This peaceful, comforting routine continued for several months, and although I wasn't unhappy with my life, there was always that quiet, nagging worry about what lay ahead. As the days passed, I couldn't ignore the gradual decline of my body, the slow erosion of my physical strength, and with it, the creeping anxiety about the future. The reality of aging hit me in waves, sometimes subtle, sometimes all-encompassing. I knew, deep down, that there would come a time when living alone would no longer be possible. The thought of depending on others, relying on them to care for me as I once cared for my children, filled me with a deep sense of unease. The fear wasn't just about losing my independence. It was about facing the vulnerability that old age brings, the helplessness that I never thought I'd experience. I tried to ignore it, to push it away, but it always lingered, like an uninvited guest at the table. It was an uncomfortable truth I couldn't escape. As I made my usual trip to the small store, a place I'd grown familiar with over the years, something unexpected happened. I happened to overhear a conversation between a young couple that stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just their voices that caught my attention. It was the raw emotion behind their words. There I stood, quietly and almost invisibly, trying not to intrude on their private moment, but my heart couldn't help but ache as I listened to them. The wife was speaking with such passion, her voice a mixture of frustration and deep, protective love as she defended her decision to spend more than €100 on durian, a rare and expensive treat for their little son. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the desperation of a mother who wants so badly to provide joy for her child, even when the world around her seems to say it's not possible. My chest tightened with empathy. This was a woman who was caught in the impossible place between love and practicality. She needed so much to give her children a piece of happiness, even if it meant stretching their already strained budget to its breaking point. Her husband, though, had a different perspective. His words, though practical, were tinged with worry, the weight of their financial situation pressing down on him. He argued that they couldn't afford such luxuries, that there was no room for indulgences in a life already stretched thin. He questioned how they could justify spending on a fruit when they weren't even sure how they would cover their daughter's school fees. It was clear that his concern came from a place of responsibility and love too, but it was laced with the fear of not being able to secure their future. His voice cracked slightly as he voiced his concerns, and in that moment, I saw a man trying so hard to keep everything afloat, but drowning in the stress of it all. As I listened, my heart swelled with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. It was as though their struggles were my own. The unease, the constant push and pull between wants and needs, the endless balancing act of parenting and surviving, it was all so painfully familiar. In the quiet of that moment, I realized how deeply connected we all are in our struggles, regardless of the different circumstances we find ourselves in. The world may be vast, but when it comes to the burdens we carry, the fear of running out, of not being enough, of disappointing our loved ones, it is all universal. It's something we all know, even if we don't speak of it. And for a brief, beautiful moment, standing there listening to their exchange, I felt my own fears and anxieties melt away, replaced by a sense of shared humanity. And then, like a flash of light in the dark, a thought came to me, one so simple, yet so filled with possibility, that it almost took my breath away. It was as though a door had opened inside me, and I knew, without a doubt, what I had to do. I approached the young couple with a proposal, one that was rooted in kindness and a genuine desire to help them. I offered them €800 a month, in exchange for their help around my house. Just basic tasks like washing clothes, tidying up, and preparing 2 simple meals each day. It wasn't a huge ask, I thought. It wouldn't take up all their time, just enough to ease the burden on their shoulders, to help them make ends meet without losing their dignity or sense of self-worth. I didn't want them to feel embarrassed or uncomfortable, but I also knew that in my heart, this was something I could offer them, a chance to breathe a little easier, even if just for a while. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. When I first suggested it, I could see the hesitation in their eyes, the quiet uncertainty. They looked at each other, unsure of how to respond, as if the idea of accepting money from someone they considered a friend was somehow wrong. I could feel their reluctance, their pride, and it was both humbling and heartbreaking. I understood their hesitation. I really did. There is a certain discomfort in accepting help when you feel like you should be doing it all on your own. But I didn't want them to refuse out of pride, not when I was offering this as a true gesture of friendship. I insisted gently, reassuring them that it wasn't charity, that this was a way for me to give back to them, to offer them something they needed without making them feel like they were being pitted. Slowly, their resistance began to soften. I could see them processing the offer, seeing it not as a handout, but as an opportunity, a small window of relief in a world that often feels overwhelming. After several moments of silence, filled only by the sound of the wind rustling in the trees above us, they finally agreed. In that instant, as their reservations turned into acceptance, I felt a rush of warmth and gratitude. We didn't need to speak much more after that. The understanding between us was clear. I could see it in their eyes, the initial doubt fading away, replaced by a quiet, tentative hope. For the first time in a long while, I could see that they believed, even if just for a moment, that there was still kindness left in the world. And that, to me, was everything. Paying them €800 a month, such a small sum in the grand scheme of things, was a fraction of what I'd pay for a caregiver or a nursing home. When I fully realized this, a wave of profound gratitude washed over me. This wasn't just a practical arrangement. It was a gift, a lifeline, one that allowed me to maintain my independence while giving them a steady, reliable income. Every day, they made the effort to come to my house, breathing life into the quiet corners of my home. They didn't just prepare meals or tidy up. They brought energy, warmth, and a sense of connection that I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Living alone can be suffocating at times, and even though I never complained about it, there were days when the silence felt like an oppressive weight. But their presence, so simple, yet so profound, transformed my existence in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about having someone there to do things for me. It was about the joy in our little routines, the quiet companionship we shared, and the way their smiles made my home feel less like a lonely house and more like a place filled with life. Over the years, the young couple who started out as my helpers have become so much more than that. They've become part of my extended family, people I rely on, trust, and care for deeply. The bond we share has grown into something beyond the exchange of services. It's a real, heartfelt friendship. I never imagined, at my age, I would find such genuine connection without leaning on hired professionals or burdening my children. There's a deep sense of peace in knowing that I can face the inevitable aging process without the loneliness that often accompanies it. I don't have to worry about being isolated or shuffled off into an unfamiliar place where I may be forgotten. That fear, so many people's fear, of being abandoned to the cold, sterile environment of a nursing home is not my reality. Instead, I have these two wonderful souls, offering me something far more valuable than any paycheck. They've given me the comfort of knowing that I don't have to face these years alone. The fact that they provide such thoughtful, meticulous care for a mere €800 a month is something that moves me deeply. It's not just a transaction, not just a financial exchange. It's a living, breathing source of joy that has enriched my life in ways I can't quite put into words. Their dedication, their kindness, their warmth, it all comes without expectation, and yet it gives back to me more than I could have ever imagined. I promised them that if they continued to care for me with the same love and dedication they always have, I would reward them with a bonus of €3,600. When I made that promise, it wasn't just about the money. It was about expressing my heartfelt gratitude. When I told them, their reaction took me completely by surprise. The sheer gratitude that flooded their faces, the way their eyes lit up with disbelief and joy, was something I will never forget. They said that this amount would change their lives, that it would give them the security they had been longing for, the peace of mind they needed. They shared how much this meant to them, and as they spoke, I could feel the sincerity in their words, the warmth in their hearts. They told me that if they could continue to find kind, thoughtful elderly people to care for, they would pour even more love into their work. That sentiment, coming from them, filled me with such warmth. It made me feel like this beautiful, almost sacred connection we've built isn't just a one-way street. It's something we all nourish and protect together. Thanks to this extraordinary arrangement, I feel a sense of renewed hope, a sense of stability in my later years that I hadn't even known I was missing. It's as though a cloud of uncertainty has slowly begun to part, revealing a brighter, calmer future. The weight of aging isn't so heavy when you're surrounded by people who care, when you know that you don't have to navigate this journey alone. And for that, I will forever be grateful. Part 2. The Story of Don Jose. In the next chapter of our story, we turn the page to a deeply poignant and heart-wrenching narrative, one that I know will resonate with many. It's the story of Don Jose, an 80-year-old man whose journey through the final years of his life is fraught with immense challenges, yet it is also a testament to his incredible resilience, unshakable dignity, and unyielding quest for comfort amidst overwhelming adversity. Despite the crushing economic pressures and the profound personal losses he has endured, Don Jose has found a way to navigate these turbulent waters with a quiet grace that defies the harshness of his circumstances. But beneath his calm exterior lies a soul grappling with the raw reality of his situation, one that is all too familiar to many elderly individuals who, like him, have lost the independence that once defined their existence. The fear of losing autonomy is a profound and deeply rooted anxiety that many older adults live with every day, and in Don Jose's case, it is not just a fear but an all-encompassing, existential terror. The thought of having to rely on others for basic care, whether it's something as simple as getting out of bed or preparing a meal, can feel like the stripping away of the very essence of one's humanity. It's an aching realization that the independence we once took for granted may one day slip away, leaving us vulnerable, dependent, and, for many, invisible. This loss of control is particularly painful for those like Don Jose, who, having worked hard all their lives, find themselves not just facing physical decline but a profound financial instability that casts a shadow over their remaining years. For him, securing even the smallest measure of comfort has become more than just a wish. It's a desperate fight, a constant emotional battle against the crushing weight of his own fears and his mounting uncertainty. Every day, the question lingers: how will I survive this final chapter with the dignity I have fought so hard to preserve? Let me take a moment to introduce myself. I am Don Jose, and this year I have reached the significant milestone of 80 years. It's a bittersweet celebration, marked by a sense of profound loss that has shaped me in ways I never could have anticipated. 3 years ago, I lost my beloved wife, the woman who had been my rock, my confidant, my partner in everything. Her passing after a long and painful illness left me shattered, and since that day, I have walked this difficult road alone. Yes, I have a daughter, but the challenges she faces in her own life have made it impossible for her to truly care for me in the way I had once hoped. My son-in-law, who I had once thought would be my ally in this journey, has instead proven to be a source of deep disappointment and heartache. His behavior toward my daughter has been nothing short of abusive, and it has cast a dark cloud over our family that I am powerless to dispel. It pains me to my core to see the woman I raised, my precious daughter, suffer so much. She has always been a loving, selfless person, but her life has been defined by constant sacrifice. Her love for her husband and child has consumed her, leaving no room for herself, for her own joy or peace. She is trapped in a cycle of work, caregiving, and enduring the abuse of a man who does not value her, who instead uses his manipulative power to keep her bound to him. Every time she dares to dream of a different life, one free from his cruelty, he crushes that hope with violence, silencing her with the kind of terror that no one should ever have to endure. It breaks my heart to see her like this, knowing that, despite her endless love and devotion, she cannot escape the prison he has built for her. And I am left here, an old man with no strength to defend her, watching helplessly as she is driven to despair. My grandson, a young man in his 20s now, grew up in this toxic environment, and though I can see the love in his eyes for his mother, he too is powerless to stop the cycle of abuse. I see him, this young bright soul who should be full of hope and promise, but instead, he carries the weight of fear and helplessness. The tragedy of watching my daughter suffer, knowing I can do nothing, is almost more than my heart can bear. It is a pain that gnaws at me every day, a sorrow that weighs me down like a heavy stone. For most of my life, my wife and I were each other's strength. We faced the world together, hand in hand, overcoming the many trials that life threw our way. But since her passing, the world feels so much lonelier, so much harsher. The burden of simply existing, of waking up every day and facing a world that has grown distant and unkind, has become almost unbearable. I am no longer the strong man I once was, no longer the provider or protector I dreamed I would be in my old age. A year ago, a devastating stroke took from me the use of my right side, leaving me physically weak and emotionally shattered. Rehabilitation has been a long, grueling process, but the full weight of my new reality has been a bitter pill to swallow. I find myself alone in this battle, struggling not just with the paralysis that holds me captive, but with the deep, gnawing grief that accompanies the loss of a life I once took for granted. I am often consumed with anger and frustration. Anger at the unfairness of it all, frustration at how much I've lost, how much I still cannot control. My dreams of independence, of a quiet, dignified old age surrounded by the love of family, have slipped through my fingers like sand. Every tear I shed is not just for myself, but for the family I once dreamed of, a family that would thrive in love, respect, and security. Now, all I can do is hold on to the fragments of my past and hope that, in whatever time I have left, I can find a way to preserve my dignity, even in the face of so much loss. This is the reality of life as an older adult, facing the twilight years with a heart full of memories, but a future clouded by uncertainty. And yet, despite it all, there is a part of me that refuses to give up hope. Because what else can we do but keep fighting, even when the odds seem so stacked against us? The struggle may be endless, but as long as I can hold on to some semblance of who I am, I will not surrender. Not yet. In the deepest, most raw corners of my heart, I felt an overwhelming, almost desperate longing to reclaim my role as protector, provider, and unwavering source of strength for my daughter. I wanted to shield her from the weight of her struggles, to be the one who stood firm and steady, no matter the storm. Yet, the reality of my situation has become a heavy, inescapable burden, one that presses on me, day in and day out, tugging at the very fibers of my soul. When I reflect on my life, the pain of knowing I have no children to care for me in my final years settles deeply within me. It's a thought that never truly leaves my mind. The fact that I have no safety net, no one to lean on when the time comes to face the inevitable. I've spent my life working, building, and dreaming, but now, with the passing years, I find myself confronted with the stark and terrifying truth. I am alone in this. The thought that I may one day face the end of my life with no one there to hold my hand, to be present in my final moments, fills me with an aching sorrow. I never imagined this would be my reality. And the worst part is that, beyond the absence of family to care for me, I have the crushing weight of financial insecurity hanging over my every move. The pension I receive, a meager €250 a month, feels like a cruel joke. It's a drop in the ocean, a sum so insignificant when faced with the monumental costs of aging. The fear that grips me is palpable, knowing that I have only about €800 in savings, a tiny sum that feels utterly meaningless when I think about what lies ahead. As I try to face this reality, the thought of moving into a nursing home or hiring someone to assist me at home seems so far out of reach that it might as well be a distant dream, something I can't even begin to hope for. The financial barriers feel insurmountable, and the helplessness I feel in those moments is suffocating. The thought of being without the means to care for me in my final years makes me question everything. How did I arrive at this point? What went wrong? Why is it that I find myself alone in this struggle, unable to turn to anyone for help? If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The emotional toll of my situation only deepens when I remember the day I was discharged from the hospital. It was my grandson who came to pick me up, and in that moment, I found a fleeting sense of comfort in his presence. His young face, full of concern yet offering a kind of strength I had not expected, was a reminder that family, in whatever form, can still offer solace. But even that small comfort quickly fades when I remember the truth of my daughter's struggles. She, too, is buried under the weight of her responsibilities. The oppressive nature of her husband leaves her suffocated, unable to ask for help, even though I can feel the silent cry for support in her eyes. As a mother, it breaks my heart to know that she feels she must shoulder everything alone. I can see how trapped she is, caught in a relentless cycle of caring for her husband, preparing meals, and losing herself to the endless duties that seem to multiply by the day. She has no space to breathe, no room to live her own life. When I first returned home, it was a confusing, uncertain time. I relied on home delivery for meals, navigating this new chapter of my life with a sense of helplessness I had never known before. There were moments of gratitude, yes, as my grandson placed food orders for me, but also a gnawing frustration. Every time I transferred the €8 to him to pay for the next meal, I felt a deep sense of shame, as though I were burdening him with my needs. I would ask him, almost apologetically, to place another order when the food ran out, even though I knew deep down that it wasn't fair to ask him to keep doing this. I kept my front door open to the delivery drivers, allowing them to enter freely, delivering meals that became my only lifeline in those dark, lonely days. And my grandson. Oh, how I wish I could say that his presence brought me comfort without any reservations, but as the weeks passed, I began to sense the shift. I noticed his growing dissatisfaction, the way his visits became shorter, his patience thinner. His words, when he expressed that he barely had any time for himself, stung more than I care to admit. The cruelest blow came when he said he feared his girlfriend might leave him if she knew how much of a burden I had become. Those words, those simple, painful words, cut through me like a knife. It hurt deeply, in a way that I didn't know how to heal. And yet, beneath that pain, I knew without a doubt that he was right. I was asking too much of him, and it wasn't fair. He had his own life to live, his dreams to chase, and I couldn't keep him from that. The idea that my very existence was threatening his happiness was too much to bear. I never wanted to be a burden on anyone, least of all him. But the reality was undeniable. I was becoming just that. The thought of it shattered something inside me, and I had to accept, no matter how much it hurt, that his life couldn't revolve around mine. I loved him too much to let that happen. This situation, this constant juggling of my own needs and the needs of others, has left me exhausted, both physically and emotionally. And as I sit here, grappling with the uncertainty of the future, all I can do is pray that somehow, in some way, I'll find the strength to keep moving forward. But I also fear that I will be faced with this truth, that in the end, I am truly on my own. And that thought is the hardest thing to bear. As I look toward the future, I can't help but confront the harsh truth that so many of us face as we grow older. The struggle to afford the basic services required to maintain our dignity and well-being. The reality is, for people like me, the financial burden is overwhelming. The rising costs of care homes are simply out of reach for someone living on a modest pension. With fees starting at a minimum of €400 a month, it's a price I could never hope to meet. The alternative, hiring a caregiver to assist me at home, feels like an even greater financial strain, a dream that slips further and further away with each passing day. It's a thought that haunts me, leaving me restless, sleep-deprived, and consumed by worry. How could I possibly navigate this? How could I maintain any sense of dignity when every option feels like an insurmountable wall? I spent so many sleepless nights pondering these questions, each one leaving me more exhausted and anxious than the last. But then, finally, a small glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. After what seemed like endless hours of searching for a way out of this financial trap, I stumbled upon a potential solution. It was something unexpected, something I hadn't considered before, but it felt like it might just be the answer I so desperately needed. This approach, while modest, seemed to align perfectly with my circumstances, offering a way forward without tearing apart the little I had left. The moment I discovered it, an overwhelming sense of relief flooded over me, washing away the tension and fear that had gripped me for so long. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt peace settle into my bones. I could breathe again. I could sleep. For a fleeting moment, I imagined a future that wasn't defined by anxiety and financial strain, but by the possibility of maintaining a sense of independence and security in my later years. The next day brought with it a sense of calm, as though the weight I had been carrying for so long had been lifted, even if just a little. The weekend was approaching, and I felt a quiet yearning deep in my heart, a desire to connect with my grandson. The world seemed to slow down just enough to let me savor this thought. The morning light streaming through the curtains felt gentle, as though the universe itself was encouraging me to reach out. Without giving it a second thought, I picked up my phone and dialed his number, my heart racing with anticipation. My voice was filled with a mix of excitement and urgency, knowing that our conversation could change everything. I needed him to understand the gravity of the decision I was facing. He hesitated when I called, mentioning that he had other obligations, that he was busy. But something in my voice, perhaps the desperation, made him pause. He promised to come as soon as he could, and when he finally arrived, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was as if the presence of family, the very essence of love and support, had the power to ease my fears. I invited him to sit beside my bed, where we would have this conversation, one that would alter the course of our lives. There was something so intimate, so raw about sitting there in that familiar space, knowing that the decisions we made in that moment could affect us both for years to come. My heart pounded as I laid out my options, each one weighing heavily on my soul. The first option, the one that seemed almost inevitable, was to sell our family home, a place that had been the backdrop of so many memories, where laughter had echoed through the halls, and where love had flourished for decades. The thought of parting with it, of moving into a sterile institution, filled me with a profound sense of loss. I couldn't bear the idea of spending my final years in a place devoid of the warmth and connection that had defined my life. The second option, however, sparked a flicker of hope in my heart. It was a more radical proposal, transferring ownership of the house to my grandson in exchange for his commitment to live with me. It was a simple offer. My small savings, a modest contribution toward household expenses, and the chance to maintain some semblance of independence, together. It wasn't about me needing care, I explained, but about sharing life, about facing the harsh realities of aging with a loved one by my side. But even as I spoke these words, I was acutely aware of the weight of my request. How could I possibly ask a young man in his 20s to take on this responsibility? The truth, as painful as it was to admit, was that this situation wasn't easy for anyone, not even for a biological child, let alone a grandson. The responsibility of caring for an aging loved one, of bearing the weight of their physical and emotional needs, is a heavy burden, one that most people, no matter how much they love you, struggle to shoulder. It was a sobering realization, one that made my heart ache with the knowledge that I was asking so much of him. Yet, in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Perhaps, together, we could navigate this difficult chapter in life with grace and understanding. But, at the same time, I couldn't ignore the fear that this arrangement might be more than he could handle, and the thought of burdening him further was almost too much to bear. As the weight of my daily struggles grew heavier, I found myself searching for a solution that would lighten the load, even just a little. The idea of hiring a part-time caregiver seemed like a small but necessary step toward preserving my dignity and independence. With a modest €140 per month, I could afford to have help with tasks that, though simple in nature, had become increasingly difficult for me to manage on my own, things like meal preparation and laundry. These everyday chores, so often taken for granted, were now insurmountable obstacles for me. My pension of €250, though not lavish, was enough to cover this expense without stretching myself too thin. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief at this possibility. Something so small, yet so vital, in maintaining the rhythm of my life. But what truly touched me was the thought of living with my grandson. The greatest comfort I could imagine was the occasional care he could provide, the quiet reassurance of having him close when I felt vulnerable or unsure. I couldn't fathom being alone at home without anyone around, especially in moments when I might need help in an emergency. The thought of that isolation, of being unseen, unheard, and uncared for, was a terror I couldn't easily shake. How could I face that kind of loneliness in my twilight years? The prospect of having my grandson nearby, offering a gentle hand or just his presence when I needed it most, seemed like the greatest gift of all. To my immense joy, my grandson not only understood this need but embraced it wholeheartedly. He spoke with such enthusiasm about the idea of living with me, describing it as a breath of fresh air in his life. His words filled my heart with warmth and reassurance. He had always struggled with the difficult relationship he had with his father, and the thought of being here with me seemed to offer him some solace as well. It was a beautiful thing to feel so mutually needed. I felt a renewed sense of purpose, as if this arrangement might not only bring me peace but also bring joy and healing to him. His willingness to share this space, this chapter of life with me, reaffirmed everything I had hoped for and more. I also found a quiet joy in the thought that my home, though humble, was spacious enough to welcome not only him but potentially a growing family. If he ever married and had children, there would be room for all of us. The thought of my home being filled with the sounds of life, laughter, conversations, the bustle of everyday moments, gave me a sense of continuity, of a life still unfolding. It felt like the kind of life I had dreamed of for us, one where love and care would flow freely through the rooms, where we would share both the ordinary and the extraordinary. The next day, my grandson returned with a caregiver he had found through an agency. She was kind, efficient, and dedicated to her work. She would come every morning at 9 a.m., just in time to begin her day with a small routine of washing my clothes, tidying up, and preparing lunch. It was a comfort to know that these simple tasks, which had become burdensome for me, would no longer be a source of stress. The idea that someone would care for my home and me in such a thoughtful way filled me with a deep sense of peace. I was willing to pay her a modest salary of €150 a month, an amount that felt fair and reasonable for the work she would do. In the afternoons, she would return to help with dinner preparation and cleaning, ensuring that my home remained a place of warmth, comfort, and care. With this new arrangement in place, I felt a profound sense of relief and calm settle over me. I had placed my trust in my grandson and in this caregiver, and together, I knew they would create an environment of love and support, one where I could rest easy, knowing that I was no longer alone in facing the challenges of my daily life. It was as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and I could breathe a little easier knowing that, in this new chapter, I was not only surrounded by help but also by love, by the care of those who truly understood the importance of keeping me safe and well. This was the beginning of something beautiful, a shared experience that would bring us closer together and, perhaps, allow us to find a deeper kind of joy in the comfort of knowing we had each other. I have been carefully setting aside €60 each month to provide for my caregiver's meals, always making sure that any extra or any shortfall is managed separately. This system has worked incredibly well for me, and I've come to appreciate the simplicity and stability it offers. The caregiver, with her kind and attentive nature, often returns a few euros at the end of the month. It's a small gesture, but it speaks volumes about her understanding of my modest eating habits. I typically eat only 2 meals a day, and I'm not particularly fond of meats or heavy side dishes, so there's usually a surplus. With my simple needs, €70 have proven more than sufficient to cover my food expenses, and it's a blessing to have this arrangement in place. What makes this situation even more fulfilling is that my grandson now lives with me. His presence fills my home with warmth, laughter, and a sense of purpose. I can't put into words how deeply his companionship enriches my daily life. His youthful energy contrasts beautifully with the peace that comes with aging, and it gives me such joy to see him growing up around the love of our family. We've worked together on fixing up the house, and with each small improvement, I feel a renewed sense of comfort. There's a new lightness in the air now, a sense of ease and contentment that wasn't there before. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, Please comment 4 below to let me know that you are still here with me. But what truly brings tears of joy to my eyes is the way the caregiver interacts with my grandchildren. The bond they share is so beautiful, so natural, and it fills me with deep, unspoken gratitude. It's like watching a tapestry of love and care being woven together right in front of me, a reminder of the strength and beauty of family. The relationships within our little household have flourished beyond my expectations. There's an unspoken harmony now that I treasure deeply, an atmosphere of support, respect, and unconditional love that wraps us all up like a warm blanket. Looking back on the choices I've made, I feel a deep sense of contentment. There's a calmness that comes with knowing that my life is simple, but it is enough. Thanks to careful planning and living within my means, I've been able to create a comfortable, fulfilling old age. In fact, I find that I'm saving more than I anticipated each month, over €60 for my pension. This extra cushion, this small yet significant savings, brings me such peace of mind. The security it provides is like a gentle reassurance that no matter what, I am okay. I can't help but feel that this is a kind of quiet victory, the kind that doesn't shout but simply is. It has reinforced my belief that even older adults, those without a solid financial foundation, can find solutions that work for them. We don't need to have everything, but we do need to be proactive about our needs. It's not about luxury, but about dignity, and the right to live comfortably, without unnecessary worry. I've seen too many people suffer in their later years simply because they didn't have the right support or security in place. And that's the hard truth. We all need safety nets. No one should have to face the end of their life in distress. It pains me to see how even the strongest relationships can become strained under the weight of life's challenges. How siblings, once so close, can drift apart when life demands too much of them. That's why we must be prepared. Especially as we age, we need a cushion to fall back on, a safety net that can prevent hardship from becoming unbearable. Even when children are kind and loving, we must recognize the importance of having an emergency fund. It's not just about money, it's about peace of mind. A small amount saved up can make such a difference in tough times. It offers a layer of protection when everything else feels fragile. I've learned this lesson over time, and it has become undeniable. The reality of financial support in later years is something we cannot ignore. There will be times when just a simple bank transfer can ease months of worry, alleviate stress, and bring comfort when we need it most. While we all long for love and care from our children, we must also acknowledge the challenges they face. They have their own lives to live, their own burdens to carry. When we ask too much of them without considering their own struggles, it can lead to feelings of resentment or guilt. I've seen it happen, and it's heartbreaking. This is why it's so important to strike a balance, understanding that love and care should go both ways. We must respect the demands they have, while also ensuring that we don't become a source of additional strain. Life, after all, is about learning, growing, and adapting to what each day brings. No matter our age, our ability to live independently, or our circumstances, we must keep striving for growth, peace, and positivity. Embracing each moment and staying open to joy, even in our later years, is what helps us become the best version of ourselves. Every day offers new possibilities, new opportunities to connect, to grow, and to find joy, even when the days may seem quieter or slower than before. And it is in these simple, beautiful moments that we realize just how rich life can be, even as we age. As we reflect on the simplicity and peace that come with careful planning, meaningful connections, and financial security, I hope you found something valuable in today's video. Whether it's the importance of creating a safety net for yourself, fostering family harmony, or learning how to live with intention and dignity in your later years, there's a lesson here for all of us. So, what have you learned so far? Is there something in today's discussion that resonated with you, something you plan to bring into practice in your own life? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share one thing you've learned and how you plan to implement it in the comments section below. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Your support helps us reach more people, and I appreciate every one of you who's part of this journey. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.